And we are back with day 18. Right? Yeah, day 18
Yes.
of Survivor 46 and 46. I just finished watching Survivor Tocantins. JT becomes our first perfect game, which I have thoughts on that, but we'll get to JT in a little while. Today we're joined by Skylar, and returning from 42 and 42, we have Tweety. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
I know I said this a couple days ago with China, how I felt like China and Tocantins were going to be like, they're like the high mid tier of Survivor seasons. Watching Tocantins today, I would say that Tocantins is better than mid. Like Tocantins is, I'm not going to give my rating right now. I'm going to wait till the end of this, but Tocantins was very good on a rewatch, and it's quick. They have 16 people, and I feel like that's like Micronesia. As much as I loved Micronesia, there were just too many people, and a lot of people I just didn't care about. Fiji is the same way. It's like a lot of people I just don't care about. I understand that China was 16 and that was fine. 16 or 18, maybe. I don't know. What were y'all's first? So going back in time, your first experience of Tocantins, and has that opinion changed throughout the years? And Skylar, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I was a classic, watch Survivor during the pandemic person. Discovered it during the pandemic. My wife watched it when she was young, so she kind of had a general idea of like who big characters are. So I started with Pearl Islands and then watched on from there. So I encounter 11 seasons in, I encounter Tocantins. I've hit some, high water marks of, okay, I've watched China, I've watched Micronesia. I know this is a big season. We're going to have a concept of big characters. Well, then, coming into Tocantins, you get a unique setting. I just hated Gabon so much the whole time I'm watching it. I'm like, I don't know if I can, maybe the show is not as good as I think it is. So then I come into Tocantins, and immediately, my wife's like, okay, there he is. There's, Coach. I know that guy is a big deal. And I have no context for Coach other than I know he's a big deal. Man, just watching it that first time, I think we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I think my overall impression of Tocantins is that it's a very complete season. And I know I mentioned this before we started, was that I think it actually compares really well to China as two just very complete seasons early in the show where you get super unique settings. In fact, I've tried to think about this today. I think Tocantins is probably the last of our truly unique settings, because from here we're going to move purely island. We're going to move to beach. We get some that are a little tougher than others maybe, but it's mostly all islands from here on out. So Tocantins is our last really unique, very different, major, huge characters, a great fulfilling narrative. Just so much going on in the show. I really loved it. How does it hold up? I think really well still in my mind. It's one that I have when I recommend to people early, when they just get into Survivor, they really like it. It makes them want to keep watching more. There are a couple of things that in hindsight don't stack up quite as well as when you're like binging it, maybe pandemic stuff. Like early, okay, I'm a big Coach fan. We're going to talk about that because I know Coach Drew, who shares a name with him, not a fan. But early Coach post-merge, I really like. Coach pre-merge is really bad. Like way worse than I remember, of being really in some way sexist, I think you could say, in the way he's talking to the women on his tribe, especially the way he's treating people like Sierra. It's just really brutal. There's also this kind of sad story. I think his name's Spencer. Is that
Spencer? Yeah.
Where you have someone on the island, this young man who's gay, and feels like he can't be himself on the island. Doesn't want to say it because there's this macho, warrior knight kind of tribe think culture. It's just really sad to have someone in their confessional say, I'm gay. And then literally on the island can't live that out. And I can't imagine trying to play a game like Survivor where you're trying to hide this massive thing about yourself. So those two things in hindsight really don't feel very well. Now, also like the way that some of the characters interact, like in anger and, making fun of each other, doesn't fit into like the 40s, but I appreciate it. And I actually really think it's good TV. So that's kind of my overall impressions, but I'll throw it over to Tweety.
Yeah, so Tocantins was actually the very first season of Survivor that I watched. I was in, I think, 8th grade. No, it was earlier. It was like maybe 6th at the time. And the first episode I ever watched was Coach around the campfire telling the Amazon story. And was this, and it was really also part of my introduction to reality TV in general. I had watched Amazing Race with a friend before that, and I was I liked the competition. I liked some of the drama, and I was like, ooh, okay, what is this? As a new person, and kind of what you were going off of, Skylar, the characters, the characters are really strong. The one thing that I do love about the season, even now, as a Survivor viewer, I care more about whether the long-term storylines of a season are satisfying, more so than whether the individual votes are suspenseful. And I still think that that essentially Jalapow's rise and Timbira's train wreck post merge is one of the best set of storylines in the show. Period.
Yeah, especially as compared to the seasons that are on either side.
Yeah, I do love that is such a thing that's how it played out. I do love it as an introductory season because it's advanced enough. The strategy is advanced enough that you can tell that there's a decent amount of thought going into things, but also nothing too complicated for any that a newer person wouldn't be able to follow. I do agree. There is some stuff that doesn't necessarily age well from the late 2000s. There is very much, and I don't know how much of this to actually attribute to Coach, but there is very much a patriarchy thing going on this season. There is very much a everybody, including the people who you wouldn't think would be, are seemingly obsessed with strength. That was something that stood out to me on this on this watch that I know we'll get more into. But yeah, overall, I do love the season. It is really fun. It's really satisfying. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, I would say the first time I watched this season, I really enjoyed it. I think that this is one of the first times in the teens that we get a cast that from top to bottom you can sit there and name every single person. At least I can. I think this is probably the first time since Pearl Islands where it's an all newbie cast where I don't have a problem remembering certain folks. Because even like Vanuatu, which I love, 4 generic white guys, I will continue to bring them up. The 4 generic white guys from the pre-merge, I know there's 2 Johns and Blake or Brooke or something and somebody else. This season, I can sit there and I can do the boot order and I can say who's on Jalapow and Tambura. And I think because everyone has a distinct personality, and I think that's what brings this season up so much, is because everyone is different enough. There's no one really getting... I feel like the person that gets lost the most in everything is probably Joe. There's nothing really distinguishing about Joe except for his little weird mini rivalry with Taj pre-merge. But outside of that, the only thing I remember about Joe is he got medevaced. He was the merge boot. But everyone is different. Even if they're boring different, it's different enough where I care about what happens to every single person going into the season. And every single time I've rewatched it, the only time that I have not enjoyed it as much was the last time I watched this in when I did 42 and 42. And it was still pretty high on my list. It was just more of I think I was preparing myself for coach fatigue, that I just kind of checked out on Tocantins. I was like, okay, yeah, it's a 4.25 or whatever I gave it, because it was like, okay, I know this is a good season. And I think that I'm just so not ready to do another 2 coach seasons that I'm just going to sit here and drag it down a little bit with me. But this time around, I didn't care, because as much as I am not a coach fan, I think that he brought a lot to the season as a character, along with people I wasn't a Tyson 1.0 fan either, but I thought Tyson brought a lot to the season. I think that JT, Steven, Taj, that trio brings a whole bunch of the rivalries that Sierra and Aaron have with the rest of their tribe, and also randomly with each other, is frustrating. And we'll talk about that whole gaslighting moment as we move on through this. But at first, I want to touch on the winner. Let's just get the winner out of the way now, because one very foreshadowing thing that happened during Final Tribal is someone asked JT, do you think you could have done this without Steven or something like that? And JT's like, yeah, I definitely could have. Now, knowing what has happened the last 2 times JT has played without Steven, obviously, every game is different, so I'm not going to say he needs Steven. But what about JT's game just here? Do you think got him to the point where he is the first perfect game winner? And Tweety, will start with you.
So I do think, I mean, he is very charming. He does very well fit the sort of what I was alluding to earlier, the general ethos of this, that this cast was looking for. He's Southern, he's physically good. He's has this vibe about him where he can no one questions it when he claims to be, have honesty and integrity and stuff. Which this cast,
the accent means that he has to.
Yeah, which this cast was obsessed with, even though he was actually behind that as manipulative as anybody. I mean, coincidentally, part of the reason why I wanted to do this particular season and wanted to talk about it with you, Skylar, in particular, is because Skylar and I met playing an org together, and we were a duo of a northerner, nerdy city boy, and a charming southern pastor. So that just felt too right. I do think, I do think JT and Steven absolutely benefited each other. Neither of them did as well on their on subsequent appearances on their own. But I do think they both have a lot of talent in different ways. I think Steven is more aware, to me, in my view, of the of positioning and of the in sort of or at least we get more of his perspective of that on the show. And whereas JT has more, I think wins the game because of his ability, of his fit for the overall cast's vibe, or or his ability, or his narrative.
Yeah,
Skyler.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing, Tweety, earlier today when I was thinking about the season. And I was like, gosh, when Tweety and I played together, we just fit this so perfectly. And I was like, oh yeah, the northerner. But then I was like, well, Tweety's really from Colorado, so I guess it's more the West. But he went to college in Vermont.
I live in Chicago now.
Yeah. I was like, look, I grew up so Southern. I'm from Mississippi. That if you were from north of Memphis, Tennessee, I thought you were from the north. I was anyone north of Memphis, Tennessee was northern to me. So. Yeah, I mean, when I think about JT, I guess we kind of you have to talk about in this season, JT and Steven kind of in tandem, is, he initially has this assessment of Steven, we're definitely not going to get along. And I'm watching the show and I'm like, yeah, we're definitely not going to like that guy. And then I just fall in love with both of them. And I do think JT on this season, especially as compared to later seasons, every Survivor cast has its unique criteria it judges people on, and it establishes its own culture. So one problem that later 30 seasons, when they start doing really theme heavy seasons, is the culture is given to them in some ways. You're a hero, you're a healer, and that's our culture, that's got to be the story. I've actually kind of missed it a little bit now, where there just kind of seems like there's no overarching story, narrative, culture in a lot of these 40s seasons, but that's a different conversation. But season 18 has such a defined culture. And someone like Coach, in a game where you're like, I don't want to put myself out there too much, I don't want to say something wrong, if they just assert this is what it is, warrior culture, and also you're having to quote unquote elect a leader, and Brendan is, there's this sub narrative of Brendan as the leader of their tribe, and Coach, it drives him crazy, where he's all along if you don't want to be the leader, I can be the leader. Well, that kind of culture plays perfectly into someone like JT, who just by being from the South and having a thick accent. I'm from the South, and he has a thick Southern accent.
He sounds like Lucas Black, if you guys know who Lucas Black is.
I don't know who that is, but I'm from Mississippi, and I'm when I was watching the final tribe, I was like, golly, this is intense. Well, it communicates to them, Debbie from Auburn, Alabama, JT's from Alabama, Coach has got this. So there's all these people that it's perfectly playing into this is someone we can trust. This is someone we can. How many times do you
He's
see
a good
in
old
the
boy.
show? Yeah, how many times do you? Good old boy does so much work in this season, but also how many times do you see in the season JT sitting by the pond fishing with like a stick in his mouth, and they're just coming up and telling him stuff. There's nothing like that in the rest of Survivor history. There's not. And now JT was
Truly.
smart enough in that moment to like recognize I don't really need to push here. These people are just coming to me and telling me stuff. Steven's doing a lot of the other work for him, getting information. So I do think he needed Steven, but I also think maybe this is a hot take. I don't think JT would have been as bad or as crazy in his other seasons if he had not won. But you're kind of playing with house money at that point. You've already won.
You can do whatever you want now. I've already won.
Yeah, it's like, what do I got to lose? I've already won. So and Heroes versus Villains is actually not a terrible appearance from him until he makes one of the dumbest moves ever. But up until then, it's actually kind of he's playing a kind of dynamic game, pushing too hard maybe in the pre-merge. That's a different season. Either way, I think JT is a unique season. 18 JT is a very unique winner like we've never seen.
And that's the problem. We're going to get to this question in a second. That's the problem with a lot of seasons as we get closer and closer to the next All-Star season is we have to look at them as a whole because we know their whole story. And I'm pretty sure the 17th or 18th day in a row that I've done this. But when I was doing seasons 1 through 7, at one point or another, I would bring up Survivor All-Stars because I knew that's what we were inevitably getting towards. And now that we're on this road to Heroes versus Villains, and we know that we're going to have 3 of these people back for that season, right? Yeah. We're going to have 3 of these people back for that season. You have to look at them as their characters, at least just in that one. And with JT, the problem is he is featured more than the other two are in that season. So like we have this narrative of, oh yeah, this guy just played a perfect game and he comes back, and everyone knows that I don't think it was the craziest thing that he did in Heroes Villains. We'll talk a little bit more about that in 2 days. But here I do agree with you. It's because he is that good old boy, and everyone feels comfortable with him. When they merge, Coach goes to him first. He doesn't go to Steven. He goes to him. And then, Tyson's like, yeah, let's do this. And Debbie says, oh, yeah, I feel great. Yeah, JT, there's something about him.
Brendan says, I would rather
Brendan
JT
wants him to
than
win.
me.
Yeah,
Brendan
That is
says, I need to start figuring out how do I help JT get to the end. It's like, what do you mean?
That's like one of the things that actually makes me angry. Like it actually infuriates me because I'm like, when people stop playing the game and start playing, I'm like, dude, this is not you play Survivor, like play to win.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and so the question: do you think he should have accepted his win, or did his legacy decrease playing again? I think his legacy actually decreases more in Game Changers. I know everyone likes to look at the Heroes versus Villains letter thing, and it's just like I said the other day, I feel like because optics-wise, you've seen Micronesia and you haven't seen Samoa, and you see all these men leaving in this villains tribe, and you don't know what this guy is, this Russell Hantz character, but you know that he's one of the only men left over there. What would you do in that situation? If you are JT, the all-powerful JT who just won Survivor Tocantins, if you're trying to show, hey, I don't need Steven, I'm going to make this crazy move. Yes, it was the wrong move. And you should never give away your idol like that. But I don't think that it was as bad as it's made out to be because of the optics of it.
It's because it didn't work. If it works, it's like all-time.
Yeah, it's an all-time move.
If it works, it's brilliant. And also, what you said was interesting because it brings up the question of was he trying to prove that he didn't need Steven? I mean, who knows? I do different people have different patterns, and different people benefit from different structures. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that as long as it's something you can repeat. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the Game Changers. Yeah, I'll answer this. I do think Game Changers decreases his legacy far more significantly. Actually, he also has, I think it's well recorded that his personal life outside of the show, in between appearances, is not in a great place. I think, thankfully, it's in a better place now. So I think that and Game Changers is really a pretty bad showing. Whereas Heroes versus Villains, I think, is he's playing really hard, and you're Heroes versus Villains. You're playing against the greatest of the greats. Whereas Game Changers is this is not good. And he not only does he tank his game, but he tanks a lot of other people's games, including Malcolm's. in a pretty unforgivable way. Like, you're really bad at this.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting dynamic with Tocantins where you get three characters with three complete, very fulfilling arcs over the course of essentially 3 seasons. Tyson's arc, very fulfilling over the course of 3 seasons. And Coach's arc, I find very poetic. And in that you see his ultimate downfall in Sopa, and then JT's golden boy. It's just like this fascinating arc. Would I play the good old boy? Of course I would play the good old boy. Come on, are you kidding me? It's like, if people are buying it, if people are buying it, I'm gonna keep feeding it. So I've got Hunter McKnight, his shirt on here. He's from Mississippi. I got to go to one of his watch parties, and I think, look, at 46, you look at everyone what they've said about the cast. People loved Hunter. He's like the number one guy. They're all like, oh, but everyone loved Hunter because there's just something about this. Like, okay, you're a good old boy, but you're kind of gentle. I think that people, for some reason, have this natural ability to trust it. And it worked in that season, but people were smart in 46, I think, to ultimately see it and say, okay, hold on, this is dangerous.
For better or worse, like, implicit biases like that are part of the game.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like, they benefit.
This isn't the first time we've had a season where half the cast have a Southern twang. And so like,
it plays well early for sure. I mean, it's,
Yeah. And what I want to get to is, I talked a lot about revisionist history with Micronesia and how, like, people just say that Parvati was this all-conquering one-person thing that was leading a bunch of people. And I feel like what gets lost in
give Amanda credit.
So gives 3 credit.
Come on, yeah.
But in this season, it feels like people just kind of forget that Taj was a very key piece of that 3. Like, it was, the 2, and that might go to the whole patriarchy thing of the season. I don't want to go down that road, but like, it might be because Taj was a big deal in that 3. And I think we're going to touch on Taj a little bit. I just want to wrap up on JT. I do feel like everything that he did at Final Tribal was the right thing to do, because I think Brendan or somebody started. And, immediately JT's like, oh yeah, growth has no place in this game, because Brendan asked Steven first about about growth, and I remember Steven answered with growth, and all JT had to do was read the room and say, okay, yeah, all I have to do is say growth means nothing in the game, and I've got this guy's vote, and he always had Brendan's vote, so like, it didn't really matter. I think that, JT antagonized Steven in a way that Steven was already flustered, and Steven just shit the bed, there. And y'all watched me. I don't know how long y'all were in the waiting room before I brought you in here, but I was getting really frustrated with Steven in there, because I was knowing full well he loses. I just didn't remember how badly he performs here. And I compared it to Dr. Bob's from Gabon's from yesterday, of just like, he's just saying all the wrong things. And it actually worked for Bob. But I think if he's sitting next to Aaron, he might win. But if he performs like he did there, like, I think it would be like he would get JT.
Story how bad of a Final Tribal.
How bad it is. Yeah. It's so bad. JT really, he already had probably Coach, Brendan, Debbie, and Taj wrapped up. And so everyone else, I think they're looking for Steven to do something, and every single time he just loses it, and you feel horrible for it. And then JT just keeps on poking at him, and Steven just keeps taking the bait every single time. Steven, I know we have to talk JT Steven, but and I know we've kind of touched on Steven already, but what outside of Steven, how do we feel?
I
love to be polished, by the way.
Yeah. I do love, I very much identified with Steven as I was watching. He is the person who is in that post merge that I felt like I could relate to the most when I first watched. I go back to the whole thing about he puts his foot in his mouth a lot at the end. At the end, I do think that I mean, really, what he again position like in terms of thinking through his positioning in the game, thinking through like who do I keep around and who don't I in order to advance myself. Like we hear more of that from him than anybody in a more like complex way, and I do think that in a way, I feel like the season was edited in a way to keep the outcome suspenseful, even though the jury was was less was more out on Steven than we were even led to realize going into that final tribal. My theory, so I do have a theory on how Steven maybe could have won. And I think what he needed to do, and to be fair, I don't know how many votes would have been gettable this way. I think he needed to reject the whole strength philosophy. He needed to reject Coach's whole philosophy.
Yeah, if you accept the criteria, you're accepting a JT win.
Exactly. He needed to be when Debbie asked him about his choice, he needed to be like, yeah, I would have taken Aaron because taking Aaron's the right move. JT was an idiot to bring me. He, more diplomatically than that. But JT,
I don't know.
Was an idiot
it
to bring
sounds
me.
like he needed to fight.
Challenge strength is irrelevant. I played the better strategic game. Vote for me. That's what he needed to do.
He got so flustered with all of these questions. You brought up the Debbie question. Just say, yes, I would have brought Aaron. It does not matter if JT gets upset right here because you guys will be friends after this. And it's very similar to Amanda in China and Amanda in Micronesia, where the tribal before the final, she got kneecapped both times, in China, what's her face? Denise is like, oh yeah. Was her name Denise? Yeah,
Denise.
Lunch Lady Denise. Amanda, you've been telling me all this stuff, and Todd's making faces like, oh man, you see how shady Amanda is. And then in Micronesia at Final 3, where Cerise sitting there saying, oh yeah, I knew it was on the bottom of the Final 5 alliance, or at the Natalie Bolton tribal. But either way, here at the Final 3, Steven's saying things like, oh yeah, we were supposed to have breakfast, and everyone's just like, who gives a shit? Like, why is this being brought up in a situation where you were trying to convince us? And Probst even says to Aaron, I feel like the best thing you could do right now is to stop, don't say anything.
Yeah,
because Steven's burying his own game. And it sucks because this entire season I did feel like, Steven was the strategic social aspect of the and JT was the physical social person of the duo. I think that, the strategic part only came from Steven, from what I was seeing, from my perception of things. But it didn't matter because they were such a good duo, along with Taj being the trio, that, you would have expected a more, yes, JT wins and JT takes Steven. You would have expected more of a fight than a Steven being very Steven. I hate saying it like that, but that's what it was. And I think that, once again, talking about a later season, his entire storyline in Second Chances is, I need to get rid of the Golden Boy. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to get rid of the Golden Boy.
Yeah, not this early. Yeah, for Second Chances, it's like,
well, not even this early. Like, if you go to the end with Joe, just out talk Joe. Don't feel like it'll be that hard.
Yeah.
But just
you can't out talk Jeremy, but you meant
Yeah, you don't have to, the Golden Boy. I understand you lost to the Golden Boy. You probably lived with this for years, and he did. He has a couple of breakdowns in Second Chances, but it's like, I don't think it was the fact that JT was the Golden Boy. I think there were a lot of factors. One, the Southern twang, and the fact that he was a good old boy. The fact that you were so flustered with a lot of the stuff that people were asking you. The fact that you couldn't make up your mind in public who you would have taken to the end. It's just like, I won't say it's a comedy of errors because it's not funny this time around. It's funny in Gabon. But here it's just like, man, I really feel for you right now.
It's tragedy.
Yeah. So
it's a tragedy. Yeah.
Steven is one of I think he might be in my top 5 favorite Survivor players ever. I really adore him. He's a incredibly good confessionalist. I think it's actually, as a character, he's an underrated character because he's so talked about as a great strategist. But he's an incredible character. He narrates the game so well. I mean, this is why he's he's on Know-It-Alls. It's like and maybe part of the reason why I love him so much is because of Know-It-Alls. I just love listening to him to break down the game. And it's clear that while even playing this game on a physically hard season, you're having to live with people like Coach, and they're bickering with Sierra. It's so hard. And he's keeping his head straight the whole time. I think that Steven played the better winning game overall, and JT played the best winning game for this season. This season, JT played exactly what you had to do for this group of people. But Steven's game should win 99% of Survivor seasons. You get this really unique culture that's created by, I don't know if it's just created. I don't think it's just created by Coach, but Coach is really driving this kind of culture. JT's reinforcing it. Debbie's the perfect, woman to reinforce it. It fills it out for JT so well. But Steven is all, like, when I'm watching Tocantins, I like JT. I'm interested in him, but I am so drawn to Steven. Like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, everything Steven's doing. He's hacking challenges in his mind. And his narrative of coming to like JT as the Southerner is way more intriguing to me than JT starting to like the nerdy Northerner. Like, JT's just kind of like, oh, I guess he's kind of a good guy, But Steven's like really personal with it. But that's also why it makes it such a tragedy at the final tribal, when the first time JT kind of barbs Steven looks over at him, and that look to me just breaks my heart, because Steven did not have the killer instinct. And JT, and it's actually Erin set this up the day before. While she's trying to convince JT who to take to final tribal, she basically tells him, like, you need to bury Steven. Like, they're going to say this. And so JT goes into final tribal with knowledge that Steven doesn't know, because Steven's not the one having to make that decision. And I think, so JT goes in knowing, I've got to bury Steven all along the way, make it look like I was just as much in this, really reinforce this culture thing. And Steven just did not have that sense of it. I don't think he said he didn't understand these people, but I think he was playing to a general Survivor jury. But then in doing so, he gets flustered and thrown off by JT. So he becomes one of the most non-committal final tribals ever, to the point where, like, does he even take credit for the things he did do? Like, it's to the point where he's almost just saying, everything we did together, and I love JT. And JT's being really mean right now. That's kind of how it feels. And it's like, dude, I mean, Debbie's question and his response is one of the worst, I think, responses. It's almost hard to believe that she says, just be honest. And he says, I don't know. And maybe he legitimately didn't know. And he has said in years past, like, he knew he had to get rid of JT. He just went banking on JT winning the next two immunity challenges, and that is a risk you take when you go deep with a partner that you played the game with. It is a risk you take. And he took the risk. I really don't blame him for taking that risk. I think it's what delivered him to final tribal. It's just, finishing second isn't too bad. But if JT loses even one of those immunities, he's gone.
He's gone.
Yeah. Because Taj, and we'll talk about Taj next. Taj, amazing. Does she beat Steven? I don't know. Very interesting question. Does Erin beat Steven? If Steven performs like that, I mean, golly. I'm not sure how liked she really was, though. So,
Tweety?
So, I forget what the original question was.
Well, more of the question down here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, would you have done the same thing, calculating odds of, like, against different people? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, no, because you all brought up earlier that y'all were the JT Steven.
Well, so yeah, I mean, for, like, as an example, going back to the game that Skylar and I played together, we didn't go to the end together. We turned on each other at Final Five. Skylar essentially won that battle, and he ended up winning that game. I think that it's one of those. This was also an early point in Survivor history where people weren't as willing to embrace that killer instinct at that point, and
right.
So
that's a good. That's a very important point.
Steven wasn't that neither of these two fully were either. I mean, I think that if JT genuinely thought Steven was going to beat him, that he would have made a different choice, but I think he knew he would win. I think Steven also knew that, but he didn't quite have the heart to stick in it with that last challenge and then pull it out. As for other people, I mean, presumably, like the edit hypes it up in a way it's so pro those two, and we're being shown like basically like everyone outside of Jalapao were edited to believe hates Aaron. We're shown to believe that like they all like basically everyone on Timbira hates hates each other, and some of that's editing to help explain what actually happened, but
Would have
that
never
is,
happened.
I mean, Timbira is an all-time great tribe in terms of how in terms of just their downfall. And that is and that I would like to get into more while we're on here.
I think that sorry, Coach Drew, if I might just say real quick, with the season just before, you see a tribe, similar downfall. You get a season right after this, way bigger tribe, bigger downfall. And I find neither of them to be satisfying narratives. And so I think you're right that it is a very iconic tribe and an iconic moment in my mind, because this downfall is very interesting all along the way. Whereas Gabon's, I do not find interesting. Yeah. In some ways, I'm like, and then in Samoa's, I mean, gosh, I just really don't like either of the seasons overall. So
I think that, and I think Twitty was the one who brought it up. Like the edit of Timbura is one of, hey, these people hate each other, so like it's basically setting the stage for what happens next. You know, we get to see Jalapao, we see these 2-3 people that are super tight, and all we're getting on the Timbura is, hey, we all hate each other, and the 2 people that we want to get gone, of Aaron and Sierra, are the 2 people that don't, because they only vote out 2 people pre-merge, and it isn't either one of them. And I do feel like the season is edited so well, because it gets, both of y'all said this is such a complete season, and it's because everything fits. Everything makes sense when we there's a logical end point. Mm-hmm. Question: what do y'all think of JT's vote at Final Five, where he switches?
This is
where he switches vote off coach to try to get his jury vote. Yeah. So,
this is where Steven should have buried him at Final Five.
Steven, and he even tries to. He even brings it up. He was like,
"That's one of those things where one of the few Steven answers that I actually agree with." I mean, not how he said it, but I actually was like, yeah, I did vote for you, coach. I made that choice, and I'm going to fucking own it. Like, that's
where he should have leaned into the warrior culture. Like,
do.
A warrior doesn't lean away from, killing its ultimate villain. JT at this moment pulls back. Ultimately, probably doesn't matter. Coach was probably going to vote for JT either way. Yeah. That was his moment to really embrace, because JT actually says, oh, Steven was lurking in the shadows of challenges, and I'm putting my neck out there in challenges. But Steven...
Challenges matter here.
Yeah. It's just such a crazy thing where it's such a double standard where JT can say, oh, you shouldn't value someone that lurks behind, and, I have to coach him up to really pull the trigger. Meanwhile, at Final Five, he can't even vote out coach, but it's
Steven says, hey, JT did, and then he immediately almost tries to back out of it. It's like, I'm not trying to speak for JT and I'm like, no, just say JT knew what the vote was going to be and switched
and did nothing.
Just leave it at that. Don't try to say, oh, I'm not trying to speak for JT. Screw that. Speak for him. You know what happened. You called him out on it right after you guys got back to camp. And then the other thing, and we're going to wrap on Steven, is one of y'all said earlier, where it's like, he, and a lot of other seasons, they will respect if you put them on the, and I think one of his last things is, I put every single one of you up there. And I think in some seasons, people would have been like, you know what, he's right. He did. And I think
in the 30s, if this is a season in the late 20s or 30s, I think that Steven's game is almost maybe even Edo the other way. It's probably not, but it really is.
Yeah, that twang. Don't forget the twang.
Yeah, the twang.
I mean, it depends. I mean, he would have had a better shot at that point making that style of argument. This group of people, again, I think that's the way he needed to try to do it. But even then, was this group of people going to have it? I don't know.
No. And when the question, do you all think that Steven should have gotten it? I mean, should have is very.
Of course. Like, I mean,
yeah.
he played a game that he played better, in my opinion, than a lot of people who won the show.
Yeah, I think he's of the zero vote finalists. I think he's the king of zero vote finalists. And of unless I don't know, Coach Drew looks like he has someone else in mind.
I have thoughts on that, but I won't touch on it right now because we are already we've got a lot to do. We still got a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
Answered this question. Do y'all think? Oh no, we already did. Yeah, fine. I mean, me personally, sitting at that tribal, no, like absolutely not, absolutely not. I said this during Gabon yesterday. I wouldn't have voted for Bob in a million years after his performance at Final Tribal, because that's what it's all about. It's about getting to the end and convincing. It's not about every, we're going to find that out next season. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Moving on to Taj and Aaron, because I want to talk about them as I feel like they have very similar games. And I do before we went live, I said that they were two very underrated social players in the season. I love Taj. The chat has been, a lot of people have been saying, oh yeah, Taj should have been brought back. We're going to when we get to the end of the episode, we will talk about who we think should have been brought back. And I feel like all of us will say Taj. But Aaron is another person where, she does have a fun storyline. And it all starts with Coach making fun of her face when, Jerry I think it was the episode that Jerry was like basically asking to get voted out.
Yeah, Aaron goes there, I think, because they were like begging Jerry. Jerry's like dying, and they're like, "Please don't leave the game. We really hate Aaron." It's like,
and it's like, why do you hate? You only hate Aaron because she voted with Candace.
Yeah,
that's it.
I don't remember. I don't even think she did vote with. I think she was just vaguely associated with Candace.
Maybe it was that. Maybe it was that.
I think, yeah. I do think Aaron was a really great underdog and an anecdote to all the other drama, because we don't see her getting into fights with people the way that we do like Sierra and Debbie and Coach and everybody.
She's very under the radar, which is crazy at that camp.
Yeah, but like she did very as a round she's she is the kind of player who I think could do well in a newer season in that is very voting blocky and very much like, how do you minimize your threat level? How do you get just one just one round further every time? I think she is one of those players who will go far if she's not taken out early.
Yeah. I think she is. Sierra is actually almost brought back for Heroes versus Villains, and the only reason she's not is because she was dating a producer of the show at the time, which is crazy. It's crazy in its own regard that she was someone that they wanted to bring back for that level of a season. But in hindsight, it's actually on one of a rewatch, Aaron really plays really well. And I think that when I was watching this the first time thinking, I really didn't like her, but I'm kind of buying. The show gives you a narrative, and I'm buying into the narrative of, oh, she's so annoying. She doesn't fit in this group, all the things. And I'm not really liking her. But then as the show develops, by the end, you see, wait, she was kind of always the opposition to Coach. She never bought into the narrative. She never bought into his leadership. And then at the end, she's the last one standing of that group. It's actually a very satisfying narrative for her. It's just that it kind of catches you off guard where you don't see her coming. And then you say, wow, her narrative is really a great one start to finish. The edit doesn't do her a ton of favors in terms of really showing that story because they're so locked in on telling the JT Stevens story, and her story is a subplot. I mean, I hate to say it, it really is kind of it's a subplot. But if she goes to the final tribal, I think that's a main thread on the season. But it just ultimately doesn't affect the ending, other because it ends up with JT and Steven.
She has that confessional that's when she votes for Coach, Dragon slayed, iconic.
Iconic, yeah. She would have been a great bring back in the next, few seasons afterwards. I think she ended up becoming
don't jump the gun. Don't jump the gun. We got to talk about that. Yeah, I mean, I know we keep talking about it, but there's so many compelling stories. But on the other one, we have Taj, and I feel like Taj more than anyone else of the season, like this time around, I enjoyed watching so much. And I would say that I despise Brendan after this season so much because that Exile Alliance should have been. It is Brendan's fault that we've gotten Coach back 2 more times, and Coach is going to be the next person we talk about. So, like, you get ready for that.
The Exile Island Alliance is,
it's all
in my mind, one of the biggest like what could have been moments in Survivor. It's emergent gameplay. It's fascinating. Taj is the one that really initiates it. I hate to see its downfall. We almost got an Exile Alliance in season 46, and again, they cannot bring it through to the end. And I'm sitting there like, man, as much as I do find JT and Steven very satisfying, the Exile Alliance was something every time I'm watching, I'm just begging, please let it work out this time.
Bring it up, please, to someone. And he screws it twice. The first time, like when he gets back and he doesn't tell Sierra about anything, then thankfully Sierra goes to exile with, I think that time she goes with Taj. Yeah. And so Taj fills her in, thank goodness. And then we merge, and Brendan's giving confessionals. He was like, oh, yeah, we got to keep this under the radar, and I'm not going to talk to him about it. And it's like, at least touch base with him. And Steven are sitting saying, I haven't heard anything. So
just go off and have a private conversation about it. Like,
happens all the time. Happens all the time. I feel like, and thankfully it doesn't screw Taj at all. Like, Taj still makes it to Final Four, and she is looked at as a threat. And I think the most telling thing as far as her being a social threat is the fact that she's not the only mother or wife on the cast. And at the auction, everyone immediately gives their money to Taj for her to get her phone call over Debbie. Like, and I feel that shows how much social, pull she has with everyone here, because Debbie, everyone that wants to see their loved one, but the fact that Taj is the one that everyone's immediately like, no, we got to get Taj to her husband and her kids. I think that is such an amazing. It's obviously it's my favorite moment of the entire season. When
my gosh, I texted Tweety 2 days ago and said, bring back family visits, because this is, outside of season 40 where they bring back everyone's family and kids, which is just beautiful. This is such an amazing moment that when she doesn't realize it at first, then she registers what's happening.
You back at camp.
Oh my gosh, it literally brings tears to my eyes. I love Taj so much. And
the funny thing is, Probst, the way that Probst starts phrasing the next phase, and you see Taj like starting to lose her mind, like, oh, please don't do this to her, and say, oh yeah, either everyone can get it, and he says what he says, and she's like, yeah, just send me to exile, please. Like, get me away from this.
And it's great because you get Eddie George, and you're like,
you get Eddie George and his large shirt that Taj wears the rest of the game.
It's just because she's out there day after day dying on Exile Island, and he's out there like, dude, this is freaking hard. Like, it just makes her feel like, wow, what an incredible woman. She's got her own amazing career, but then she comes out here. I think she's kind of like a fan, but not super strategic in terms of like how much she knows about the show. Then it's really
is that Taj didn't think that most of this was real.
Oh yeah.
And when she found out that it was, because I think that's one of the things is like, I guess they had tried to invite her back for another season. And she basically asked, hey, like, is it fake yet? And they're like, no. It's like, well, then no, I'm not.
Yeah, but I agree that that family visit is possible. I think probably is my favorite one. TBH, or the one I remember the most.
That and Winners at War are my two favorites.
Yeah, I think
it's so good. I do think. I don't get a set. I do with Taj. I do just in general love her, like her sass. Her we don't get as much of her after the merge. I notice, but her will.
We get her facial expressions whenever Coach talks.
Her willingness to call out other people's bullshit when need be. Her willingness to just go there. It is refreshing and needed for the season.
Yeah. There's two things I want to add about this season and about Tosh specifically, is that in my mind, when I think back to Tocantins, we talked a lot about Steven and JT as a duo. I really think of it as more of a trio in that, like, there's 3 players. Now there's bigger characters, I guess, that I think of in terms of Coach and Tyson coming back. But when I think of Tocantins, like to me, that narrative, like Taj is so central to how I remember Tocantins. I just think she's indispensable to the point where I convince myself every time she's in the final three.
Final three,
yeah. And then I'm like, oh wait, she goes out at 4. And then I remember,
That's
of
so
course,
random,
Aaron.
right?
Yeah, but it's like because it feels like Taj is so. Why do they take her out here? Kind of thing. And there was someone in the chat that asked, like, right here, wouldn't Aaron have been more of an immunity threat than Taj? That could have been part of Steven's thought process. My guess is really they just overplayed this. They thought she could beat. She's a social threat. And I think they ultimately just hurt someone they didn't have to hurt. I think it probably was an unnecessary move, but one they just thought, oh, do we really risk it?
Yeah, and sadly, it comes down on Steven.
Yeah. Which I thought was totally unfair that it comes down on Steven. I thought JT's just as much, but Tosh felt closer to Steven. And, so the other thing I was going to bring up was that this season is maybe the funniest Survivor season there is. I'm trying to think of true humor, of like characters being funny, characters unintentionally being funny, drama being funny. There's people telling jokes. I mean, it's just an all around really funny experience. Like Taj's facial expressions, her confessionals are hilarious. If you find Coach funny, which I do, he's totally ridiculous. Tyson, with his little, he's got the little loincloth thing going on. The way that he's talking to Sierra is hilarious. The tooth, JT. I don't
tad mean spirited, but yes, it is fun. It is because it's so deadpan. Because it's so deadpan the way
it's like you can't quite believe he's actually saying this bullshit.
Yeah. I just think it's an all around Sandy. I mean, I haven't even mentioned her. Like, first off, the first episode humor, Carolina is so gets voted out for basically being annoying. Like, I mean, it's like you basically get a whole episode where they're just like, this is the most annoying person I've ever met. I think that's hilarious.
And Joe calling her Caroline. Joe kept on calling her Caroline.
And then Sandy is just so gold. I mean, like, perfect pre-merge character. Please don't make it to the merge. Don't need to see your gameplay, but you are great for this pre-merge. I just think it's an all-around really
great
funny season.
Top to bottom.
And they just bring humor, and everyone's bringing it except for a few people that it just skims over.
Yeah, Jerry. Question: I thought Aaron was a bigger villain than Danielle. Thoughts? And I'm assuming you're talking about Danielle, captain of sports. Sure. Like
I think Aaron's a better cast for heroes versus villains. You can't bring back 4 people from Tocantins.
That's a little much. But like,
I think that. So I mean, if I had to pick between Aaron and Danielle, like as far as who I would want to see again. At this point, knowing what I do get in 20, I would rather see Aaron play again of the two. I do feel like Danielle, when I did Panama, I asked, why do we think Danielle was made as a villain? Is it because she voted out Captain America, or was it because she was a part of Kasaya, which was the villainous tribe of the season? And I think everyone just kind of agreed, it's because she voted out Terry, even though she said that she wouldn't. I think that's the most villainous thing compared to Aaron. I don't think Aaron, besides the fact that she was a part of Timbura and kind of antagonized Sierra, there's really not much villainous about her. Not to say that, if they had put her on the villain tribe that I wouldn't have, put her on the villain tribe. That's as long as Candace is on the heroes tribe, the stuff does not matter.
Yeah, I think Aaron is probably a villain solely because Coach says she's a villain, and that's not a good reason for someone to be a villain.
Coach himself was on the villains tribe.
And he didn't think
he's like, why am I on the villains? I'm a hero, So
okay,
and I guess that's a good transition to our boy Coach.
Okay. Yeah, so Coach. When I first started playing online games, I was going to go by Andrew because obviously, or Denson, whatever. And the very first game I played, they were like, hey, we've got a couple Andrews and also one of the people on the prod team. And it's like, can we call you Coach? And I'm like, not knowing what online games were about, I thought if I go into a game with the name Coach, people are going to think that I'm going to try, like I'm trying to emulate this Jamoke. And so I tried my best to make sure that people, knew that I don't want to be called this. And this kind of stuck the rest of the time. And it doesn't help that I am a coach. And so I get called Coach all the time. Either way, Coach for Tocantins. I remember the first time I watched the season, I hated him. Like it was just like I wanted him gone immediately. I think I was mostly rooting for the Exile Alliance because like I just need this guy off of my TV. Well, then I watched on Heroes versus Villains. It's like, okay, I think I get it. And then South Pacific just totally just went down the toilet. Every other time I've watched Tocantins, it's like, okay, yeah, I get this coach. I get it. I get that he's the character, he is the villain, and as long as he doesn't win, which he doesn't, it's great television. I think where my bigger problems with Coach do come in South Pacific. And this season, I don't like the way that he gaslit the shit out of Sierra during that one round. I don't like the fact that he promotes himself as one thing, and it becomes overbearing to the point where it's like, okay, I think he might actually think he's actually this honorable person. I don't think it's Debbie being sad that Sierra's calling out her lies, and it's like, okay, Debbie, but you do know that you are lying about this. With Coach, it's like, wow, he's really buying into a lot of this stuff. Obviously, the penultimate episode with him going to exile is one of the greatest episodes of all time.
Oh.
But I think that the fact that he has the foils of Taj and Aaron, yeah, them giving I only watched the recap episode today just to hear Aaron say, "Who is this jackass?" Because that's just fully encapsulates what this person is. Him looking at the weather and saying, "Oh yeah, the storm is going to go this way," and this cuts to them just getting rained on. Those are the parts, like you mentioned earlier, that it's funny. And as long as you look at Coach as a funny villain, it works. When he becomes more serious, when like it's actual game stuff going on, it's like, man, I really don't like this man at all. Like him sitting on his high horse, like Sierra should do the warrior way and falling on her sword. It's like, what are you talking about? Tweety, I am going to skip with this because I really want to get. For years, I've wanted to meet an actual Coach fan who wasn't just ironically liking him because he's funny. What is about Coach 1.0? We're just going to do 1.0 for today. That has made you a fan throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, I love Coach. When I first got my first like big job as a pastor, actually, my friends got me a cameo from Coach, where he goes on for 6 minutes, just the most Coach cameo ever. He's giving me advice. He's telling me all this, and it's just like, this is so Coach that he thinks that he's an expert in this field, that he can just give me all this thing. I think part of the reason I love Coach is, first off, my dad is a crazy person. He's the kind of person that just tells stories that you're like, that's clearly a lie, but you clearly believe it. And so I think when I'm watching Coach, there's a lot of me that's like, oh, this is like my dad. Like this person reminds me of my own like biological dad, in the sense that you're crazy. Like you're literally an insane person. But I think the thing that makes me like Coach is that you're saying like, whenever you were saying like, the thing I don't like is that he has all this honor code, he's got this narrative about himself and he actually believes it. I think that's why I'm drawn to him, is that in real life, there's so many people that have narratives about themselves that they buy into and play into. And it's just not who they are. And they can't see that for themselves. I think it's so fascinating to see someone live out on TV a hypocritical stance about who they are that everyone else can see about them except themselves. And it just, to me, creates such a fascinating dynamic to watch it play on TV. And I think Coach across his seasons, what you really see, and I actually think that, I think cult Coach is pretty tough to watch at times. I mean, especially as a religious person.
As a pastor, I feel like as a pastor.
As a religious person, I really don't appreciate it. I think it's pretty dark. Like, I mean, the way he uses Brandon in that season is really dark.
God told me, do you have to give up the necklace? Like, come on.
It's really dark. I do think it's where Coach actually is in some ways the most self-aware in that season, where he's actually using some of these things to his benefit. I don't think he should have won, but it's a fascinating arc to see someone go from the growing lack of self-awareness, completely unself-aware. He goes on to Heroes versus Villains, where I think he was not as crazy whenever he first started Survivor. I think he became Coach, quote unquote. And I think he convinced himself, I am Coach. That is who I am. And he goes on Heroes versus Villains, where he's leaning into this. Tyson having to slap him around on the beach is just one of, like, stop putting the feather in your hair. Stop saying the crazy stuff, to me, it's such an iconic moment of these two characters. And then both of them go on to make final tribals, right? And then Coach, the next time he goes on, I think his arc is I think it's cinematic in like a dark, twisted kind of way, but also satisfying to see him crash and burn at the end of that season. And this season, I just think he drives so much interesting TV to where there's other times where there's people that are chaotic, and everyone has to orbit around them. This season, he really doesn't have that kind of force, and not until Sopa does he have that force. So his chaos is kind of this in the upper right-hand corner of the screen where it's just kind of all the time gestured at like, this person's totally crazy, right? And everyone's like, he's totally crazy. So what I love is that he believes it, but we clearly don't. And no one else clearly does. If it was something where are we supposed to believe this or not, I would find him totally unbearable. But the show leaning into this, I think, is just a fascinating human psychological dynamic that's just great. And he doesn't he eats a lot of screen. But I think that's why a lot of people don't like him. It's like, okay, I get that he's crazy, but like this is a little bit too much. But to me, I can't stop consuming this person having such a like I said, just the dynamic of having a warped view of who you are, and everyone else can see it and you cannot, is such a real human thing that I'm just watching on screen that I can't believe it's real, I guess you could say.
Tweety,
I think that's why I love him.
Tweety, I know you brought it up earlier, and I just quickly want to. My favorite Coach moment of this season is obviously him telling the story about him being beaten by the little people with the clubs, and him at tribal. I think the next time saying, "Oh yeah, I had to keep it basically PG because they tried to eat my ass or something," and it's just like, what is who is this jackass? Like you said, who is this jackass?
Could you imagine living with him? I mean,
right?
No, I couldn't. But that's I know we're gonna.
That's the thing. We put ourselves in our shoes of the people who like. That's what was hard for me. I think the first time I watched this season, I'm like, I cannot imagine fucking living with this guy. Like, how can for 36 days? Kill me now.
Well, and it was brought up like, do we think Coach could have won in this season? I think that if Coach sat next to maybe Aaron, like if we're talking about just the final five, if he sits next to Aaron, he probably does. If he sits next to Taj, I don't think so. If he sits next to JT, absolutely not. If he sits next to Steven, we have to vote against Steven, who's being overly spacey, I guess. And you go, Coach, and we've seen how Coach performs at Final Tribals. And it's instead of removing the character, he stays in. You don't need to do that at this point. That would be a fun, if you want to call it a fun final tribal between the two of them. But I think that no, he gets destroyed by
Sierra
JT.
is his only win condition, I think. Like he has to go with Sierra.
Yeah. I don't know. He's going to go with Tyson. It's like, you understand how badly you would lose to Tyson. There would be an extra vote casted for Tyson because even though Tyson, and one of my favorite things about all the Ponderosas have been taken off of YouTube, which is really frustrating. But one of the most telling things from the Tocantins Ponderosas are Sierra and Tyson have a pretty good relationship there. They're like, there's no one giving anyone the cold shoulder until Coach shows up, and him and Sierra do not talk at all. I don't think him and Aaron talk at all either. And I honestly think it's because Tyson was he was mean, but once again, it was like there was a very deadpan way towards Sierra as compared to the way that Coach treated her on her way out, where he's basically trying to convince her that he didn't try to start the Timber Alliance with her again, and she's having an emotional breakdown. It's like, yeah, of course. I think that's the reason that Taj votes for Debbie that round.
Yeah,
is because Taj actually feels bad for Sierra in that moment. She has a heart. I don't want to because we would you have targeted Steven, JT, or Ryan finally Taj? I would have targeted JT first, and I would have just Taj and Steven. I feel like me personally, I could out-talk both of them. I think that is JT has to go. And in my head, JT won a lot of immunities this season, or went on a long streak. that streak really doesn't start until final.
I think it's just the last two. I think he wins the last two. Okay, it's the last three. Yeah.
Steven wins the round that your coach goes home. Everything is starting to get muddled.
Yeah. I'll say I think it's actually a good bet that Steven makes. Like, is he going to win the final 3 challenges? I actually think that that's not a bad bet that Steven makes, and it just didn't work out in his favor. But I actually think it's not bad. You don't usually expect someone to win 3 in a row. But
yeah, and I agree. I think there is always even now we see dilemmas of like how long can you keep your number one in the game? Like, I mean, I think like with Survivor 43, the Jesse and Cody thing, there's still a long going debate about whether or not that was the right move as an example. But yeah, it's one of, who knows what would have happened there.
Like I said earlier, I think that Here's His Villains coach is probably the actual best because we don't like, he doesn't outstay his welcome. Like
you get just enough.
You get just enough, and then he goes to the jury, and him and Courtney are having the time of their life. Courtney, and JT are having the time of their lives over there. We get the Tyson coach moment, which is one of my favorite Tyson and coach moments of all time. I think that is the perfect. His little showmance with Jerry is neat.
I totally forgot about that. That is such a weird.
It's so much fun, but like I said, South Pacific. It's uncomfortable. And then this question: do y'all think that Coach was really?
No, I'm not convinced he's been to Brazil until he filmed the Tocantins. I'm not convinced he is. I'm not convinced he's left the country until he went on Tocantins.
Yeah, I absolutely not. Coaches, has the man probably had an exciting life?
That is the weird thing about Coach is he actually is a very fascinating person. Like he is actually like a world-class trumpeter, a college soccer coach, and lived in Russia and knows Russian. Like he is actually a weirdly interesting person. And I almost think that's the worst part is that he knows that there's a couple of interesting things and thinks he's the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah. And that's as we start to wind down here. I think that, and we've touched on it a lot tonight, the characters in this season, and this is like, as far as eras, as I go through it this time, I'm trying to like pinpoint eras in the show. And I would say like, there's the All-Stars era. And then now until Heroes vs. Villains, it's the character there. Like we get a lot of the characters that we come to know come from this era. No matter, and we talked about this during China. Yet James, people overrate James as a player because he's not a good player.
He's a pretty bad.
He is a great character. Yeah, and him and Coach have the same trajectory of these three in their 3 seasons. They don't change at all. They are the exact same. They are the exact same person turned up or down. But they like it's not this is jumping the gun by like a week and a half. But the reason I realized that the only time that I've ever picked a winner based off of the edit is Tyson, and the reason that I figured that out, he was a dick. In Heroes vs. Villains, he was purple, and in Blood vs. Water, he's shown crying multiple times, and that's something that we don't get Tyson being anything other than the jokester before. And so now that you're showing us this side of him, well, he's clearly winning. I could have still been wrong, but I wasn't.
Good call.
Thank you. 1 for 46. I'm killing it. But as we do start to wrap up, I do want to kind of touch on the fact that this is our second to last time that we're going to have a final 2.
Heartbreaking, honestly.
Which is crazy. This is one of the last times that we have a cast of 16. This is one of the last times that we don't have a tribe swap. Which is
almost 40s, I guess.
Yeah. Oh no, because Samoa Samoa doesn't have a tribe swap.
Yeah.
Here's what Villains doesn't, and then we get does Redemption Island doesn't. South Pacific doesn't.
But it's a dying breed, though.
I guess they started doing a lot more swaps like mid-20s on. I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
But it is true. It's a much older school season than we.
It's such a quick watch. I had so much fun watching this today, and I think it was just because the mix of HD, having 16 people, distinct people, the fact that there we get so many of these people, and this is going to that question. We've got 3 or 4 people from the season that come back. It's
JT, Steven, Coach
and Tyson. Were they the 4 right ones? Should there have been others?
I mean, I think there was reason to bring all 4 of those people back. I mean, I would have enjoyed seeing Taj again. I would have enjoyed seeing Aaron again. In particular, I think otherwise I'm mostly okay with how I'm mostly okay with how things went. I do think that for heroes versus villains, everybody who was there was put on the right tribes. I do think I mean, I know you'll do the South Pacific episode, but I don't Ozzy versus Coach is such an out of pocket pairing. I don't get why that happened.
Not a good one, yeah.
But otherwise, I think that's where I would leave it.
I think just I guess wrapping up some final thoughts on the season. I think it's a top 10 season for me personally. I think it's, like we said, it's very complete. But the other thing, and Coach Drew, you just kind of mentioned this, is that it feels very back to the basics. It feels like an older school season, and then you're like, wow, this is 2 seasons before Heroes versus Villains, and I think that's why I love it. Even though there's exile, even though there is an idol or 2 idols or whatever stuff, it still feels. And I think that the newer seasons could actually learn from this. Like, you can have twists, but this is still very character driven. Like, the narrative is supplied by the players, and it's really a fascinating season. Who should have come back? Controversial. I think Tyson at the time was kind of an odd. Is he a big enough character to come back for Heroes versus Villains? He's funny. He's mean. Is he really as iconic as Jerry? It's like they feel like there's a big disparity there between their level of should they have come back. Obviously, it was a good decision. And it led to a lot of great TV. So obviously the casting people know a lot more than I do. I think I'm just trying to comment on who should have come back. Yeah. I'm glad he came back. I'm just saying at the time it's kind of a surprising choice. Whereas Coach feels he was larger than life. JT coming back 2 seasons later was probably a little quick, but he kind of was the new era hero. If Colby was the first 10 season hero, he was the new era hero. I wish JT or Steven had come back sooner, personally. I think that he was, while Game Changer, Second Chance is such an amazing season, probably a season he couldn't win. And I really think he would have been better on Fans versus Favorites 2. But they couldn't have I think they didn't want to put him and Cochran on that season. Personally, give me Stephen Fishback over Cochran
over Cochran.
Yeah, but people love Cochran. I'm not one of them.
I know.
I don't dislike him. Yeah, but I think that Taj is the big missing piece here. Aaron, bring her back for second chances. A good second chances vote person, I would have been interested in. Survivor season 50. If I saw her on the cast, I'd be like, wasn't expecting that. Okay, cool. But Taj is the one that I would get really excited for. And I think Survivor is poor for not having her on Fans versus Favorites. My guess is they have called numerous times and she has said, I'm good. That would be
absolutely
not.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Tweety?
You're right, but
Tweety?
Oh, I just said that is her right. I agree.
No. Oh, okay.
That is, I do agree, and I do agree with all that. I do think this season does it does navigate the sort of tension between different like eras of Survivor, and I think it does go, yeah. Like, you know, memo, like what I'm screaming from the from my couch, or from or when I'm messaging people about the show, like, hey, CBS, trust your casts, trust your people to make the storylines happen that are worthy of that need to happen. Let them do your jobs for you. And this was one of the seasons where that really worked out.
Yeah, and I would say that I think the 4 people that have come back are the right ones. I would say that yes, Taj and Aaron would be the 2 that I would want back. Yes, I guess Sierra would have been interesting, but what really left a bad taste in my mouth is her final tribal speech, which was super antagonistic and against JT and Steven. It wasn't like she had Coach and Tyson sitting up there. That was weird. Season 50, if y'all had to pick one person, whether they've come back no times, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, Tyson's come back 4 times. One person from this season that you were like, okay, you know what? I'm glad that they're. I know one of y'all mentioned Aaron, but like, would Aaron be your actual pick of like if they showed up in 50?
I would really want Steven back. I would really think I'm a big believer in, I want narratives to feel complete, tied up neatly with a bow. JT's complete. I think it's cinematic. Coaches complete. Like, even though you might not like it, like even like I said, even though as a religious person I find a lot of that season offensive, I like that season. I even actually like Soap Pop because I find it to be a nice bow tie to his career. Tyson, complete. Winners at War was probably even more than we needed from him. I think Steven feels to me like this unresolved thread in Survivor history of like someone that deserved better for their final act. And he had a really rough go in Cambodia physically. Yeah. I think I would love him. I just adore him. He would never, I think he's pretty much said the door's closed, but I would really love it.
I think I had the same thought, actually, because I don't need Coach JT or Tyson again. They've all had solid storylines. Again, I like yes, it would be between Steven, Taj, and Aaron, and I don't know if any of them want to do it at this point. But I would say, there is so much potential for Steven, especially depending on who else is on that cast. I do think, like, I'm personally expecting the season 50 cast to be very, 30s onward,
33 onwards.
Or I wouldn't be surprised if it's all 30s onward. But if it's not, and they do have a good portion of these older school people, Steven is a great fit for that.
Yeah.
But even that, he even sort of carried that mantle back on Second Chance, and that didn't entirely work out for him. But yeah, I think that's what we're going for.
What Skylar said about how, I guess both of you are saying how he needs to finish his trilogy. His second time, he's almost so worried about this Golden Boy thing that we don't really like. We need Steven now that now he's fully removed from everything. JT
this demon
related.
Has been exorcised.
Yeah, I don't care anymore. Now I'm just out there more. I'm going to be more like the first time I played. Because the first time I played, I wasn't worried about the Golden Boy, and I was just out here, playing Survivor and being a know-it-all. And I think if I remember correctly, that was a lot of people's fears for him playing Second Chances was, oh, people are going to know him from know-it-alls. Like, they might try to target him early because, he's better than ever. Like, he knows everything. And it's like, no, he actually was able to survive and had Andrew Savage call him Fishbuck the entire time, which was hilarious. I would say that, my answer would be, like Gabe's, would be Aaron. Just thinking realistically, knowing that Taj is not coming back, knowing that I don't really want to see JT or Coach again, not for, nothing personal. I mean, obviously, I would love to see Tyson again because I do love him, but like he has played 4 times at this point. It's like, okay, yeah, your
I
story's
kind of think
done.
4 is the limit for me personally. I think 3. If I could put a cap, like legally, you can't come back.
Yeah,
I
like
think,
at that point, like
unless
go
it's
on the train.
3, in which case I don't
Like,
care how many times he plays. I need 3 in my life all the time.
Yeah.
And then Steven, I think I would enjoy a Steven return for a 50. I think I would still pick Aaron in that situation. But I mean, if we get any type of Tocantins players on 50, that's cool. Unless it's like Joe, whatever.
I mean, I love Coach, but I would probably be disappointed to see Coach come back because I would know
he would take the spot from
he would
somebody.
take up too much space. He lost Final Tribal, and I mean, on a second return, so I guess I'm just kind of like, you did it, you had your shot, and you blew it. I don't need another. You don't get another shot, in my opinion. I don't know that.
No, I get it.
Yeah. One thing from playing orgs, one thing that I've noticed is like from certain people, like there are certain people I know in the community who have this, like, who kind of have the same, like, who seemingly have a lot of the same patterns over and over again. And like and so we don't get as much of that because typically people only play like twice, maybe 3 times if they're lucky. And so I do think that there can be value in seeing people try to overcome that or not. But
you don't want to bring back one trick pony.
Like that was another thought. That was another thought I had that came to mind as we were talking through this. I do the question, and that was the whole theme of second chance. Like, who will overcome their what got them the first time to an extent that was some people, including
Will Sierra vote out of her mom again? It's like, what are you talking about, Jeff? Yeah. She's not even here.
She's not there.
Why are you bringing this up? Okay, so overall, I'm going to give Tocantins a 4.50 out of 5, which puts it. Okay, this is going to be hard. So I'm going to put it in number 4. So I'm going to have it right in front of Borneo and right after Vanuatu.
I'm not as high on Vanuatu.
When was the last time you watched Vanuatu?
A long time. I'm not sure I could. Yeah.
Skylar, the next time that we talk to each other, I need you to watch Vanuatu because it is the most underrated season in the history of the show, and it's not even close. Vanuatu is amazing.
Yeah. I look forward. All right. I commit to that. I can come back and talk. I got Q his hat and Hunter's hat here because they're Mississippians. And I got to meet those guys and hang out with them. So I can talk 46 and maybe I can, have watched Vanuatu by then.
Okay, perfect. And so both of y'all you guys have the invite for day 46 when I'm going to be live streaming the entire day. So I'm hoping to get everyone that has come in throughout this whole process and throughout that day. Thank you both so much for taking the time to do this. This is now the second longest of this whole series that we've done. So this is good.
I'm sorry, I could go forever.
I had a lot of fun. And we just kept going. This has been so much fun.
Trust me, the longer I have to wait to watch Samoa, I'm happy with it. Thank you to everybody in the chat. As always, thank you for everyone listening now and listening later. And we will see you after Survivor Samoa. See you guys on the other side.
See ya.
Take care, everybody.